In a room filled with luxury, an unexpected presence made time stand still. Scoffing laughter turned into stares of awe. What started as an unusual invite sparked a quiet revolution, and when the truth came to light, nothing was ever the same. Again, subscribe to the channel before you hear this story that defies all expectations. The envelope landed on Emily's desk with a soft sound, interrupting her concentration. She looked up from the financial spreadsheet she had been meticulously analyzing for hours and met the amused gaze of Julie, her assistant. "This arrived for you." "Looks important," Julie commented with a curious smile. Emily adjusted her simple framed glasses and carefully picked up the envelope. It was made of textured, cream-colored paper with her name calligraphed in gold on the front. No sender. Upon opening it, she found an elegant invitation to the annual gala ceremony of the Bennett Group, scheduled for next Saturday at the luxurious Grandview Hotel. "There must be some mistake," Emily murmured, confused. At that moment, her phone rang. The name Richard Bennett flashed on the screen. Emily felt a flutter in her stomach. Richard was the president and majority shareholder of the conglomerate for which she had worked as chief accountant for almost 5 years. They rarely had direct contact. The company hierarchy was too rigid for that. "Hello?" she answered, trying to control the nervousness in her voice. "Emily, did you receive my invitation?" Richard's deep voice sounded excited on the other end of the line. "Yes, Mr. Bennett, I just received it, but excellent, and none of this Mr. Bennett business. After what you did for the group this year, the least I can do is personally invite you to our celebration. Your reports and suggestions were brilliant." Emily blushed. She spent her days poring over numbers, reviewing financial statements, and optimizing accounting processes. She never expected this kind of recognition. "I appreciate it, but I don't know if it would be appropriate. These galas are for executives and—" "Nonsense," Richard interrupted her. "I want everyone to meet the brain behind the financial restructuring that saved millions this year. I'll be expecting you on Saturday at 8 p.m. My assistant has already forwarded all the details to your email." Before Emily could protest again, Richard hung up. She stared at the phone, stunned. "What happened?" Julie asked, curious. "Apparently I'm going to the Bennett Group's annual gala," Emily replied, still in disbelief. In the following days, Emily continued her usual routine, immersed in numbers and reports, trying to ignore the invitation that seemed to burn inside her desk drawer. On Thursday, Julie entered her office with a determined expression. "You still haven't bought a dress for Saturday, have you?" Emily sighed, removing her glasses and massaging her temples. "I'm not going to buy one. I have that black dress I wore to my cousin's wedding. It's discreet and—" "No way," Julie protested, pulling Emily by the hand. "You'll be representing the entire finance department at that gala. We're going out right now. I know some perfect stores." Despite her protests, Emily found herself dragged by Julie on a shopping trip that lasted all afternoon. She tried on dozens of dresses under her assistant's critical eye, until they finally found the dress, a deep burgundy model with a simple but elegant cut that flattered her delicate silhouette, which Emily normally hid under austere suits. "This is perfect," Julie declared. "Now we just need shoes, accessories, and to sort out your hair and glasses." "What's wrong with my hair and glasses?" Emily asked, slightly offended. Julie smiled patiently. "Nothing's wrong, but we can do better for a special night." On Saturday, after a morning at the beauty salon at Julie's insistence, Emily barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her brown hair, normally tied in a severe bun, now fell in soft waves framing her face. She had exchanged her functional glasses for a more modern and elegant frame. The makeup, light but strategic, highlighted her green eyes and well-shaped lips. When the driver Richard had sent rang the doorbell at exactly 7:30 p.m., Emily took a deep breath to calm her racing heart. "It's just a corporate event," she repeated to herself. Nothing more. But it wasn't just a corporate event, Emily realized as soon as the car stopped in front of the Grandview Hotel. A red carpet extended from the sidewalk to the main entrance. Photographers were recording the arrival of guests all impeccably dressed. Influential business people, Politicians, celebrities, the cream of society was there. Emily hesitated as she got out of the car, immediately feeling out of place. She clutched her small clutch tightly as she walked timidly down the red carpet, trying to ignore the curious and confused looks she received. Clearly, she wasn't the type of person they were used to seeing at these events. Upon entering the lobby, decorated with white and gold flower arrangements, Emily was greeted by a receptionist who checked her name on the list and led her to the main hall. A sea of gala dresses and expensive suits stretched before her. Crystals clinked, sophisticated laughter echoed, expensive perfumes mingled in the air. Emily remained near the entrance, desperately searching for a familiar face. She spotted some colleagues from the finance department talking in a corner, all high-ranking executives. None of them noticed her presence. "Emily! You came." Richard Bennett's deep voice made Emily turn. There he was, imposing in his tailored suit with a warm smile that didn't match his reputation as a ruthless businessman. By his side were three men whom Emily recognized as Frank Williams, Gregory Mitchell, and Charles Fletcher, the other main partners of the Bennett Group. "Gentlemen, this is Emily Carter, our chief accountant," Richard introduced her with evident pride in his voice. The three men assessed her with expressions ranging from surprise to poorly disguised disdain. Emily felt her face burn. "So this is the famous accountant we've heard so much about," commented Frank, the oldest of the three, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Richard won't stop praising your work." "It's a pleasure to finally meet." "You," added Gregory with forced politeness, "although I confess I expected someone different." Emily swallowed hard, understanding the subtext perfectly. They expected someone who naturally belonged to that world, not a simple accountant of humble origin who had achieved her position through much study and hard work. "The pleasure is mine," she responded, with a calmness she didn't feel. "Mr. Bennett was very kind to invite me." Charles, the youngest of the partners, observed Emily with a curiosity that made her uncomfortable. "Richard mentioned that you implemented a new financial management system that saved the company millions. Impressive for someone so young." Before Emily could respond, a stunning woman in a gold dress approached the group and linked her arm with Charles's. "Darling, who's your new friend?" she asked with a calculated smile. "This is Emily Carter, the group's accountant," replied Charles. "Emily, this is my wife, Brittany." "Accountant? How interesting," commented Brittany, assessing Emily from head to toe. "I didn't know administrative staff were invited to these events." The comment provoked discreet giggles among others who had approached to listen to the conversation. Emily felt her stomach sink. Richard noticed her discomfort and quickly intervened. "Emily is not a simple administrative employee. Thanks to her financial acumen, we avoided a crisis that could have cost the company dearly. In fact, I have a surprise for everyone tonight related to this." A waiter passed by offering glasses of champagne. Emily took one, grateful for the distraction. While Richard continued talking with his partners, she began to discreetly move away, seeking a moment to regain her composure. "Don't let them intimidate you." Emily turned, surprised to find an elegant middle-aged woman observing her with an understanding smile. "I'm Lisa Bennett, Richard's sister," she introduced herself, "and I recognize when someone is out of their element. Come with me." Lisa led Emily to a quieter area of the hall, near a large window that offered a spectacular view of the illuminated city. "My brother talks about you a lot," Lisa commented. "He says you have a rare talent for numbers and an even rarer integrity." "In the corporate world, your brother is very generous with his praise," Emily replied modestly. "Richard doesn't praise anyone without reason," Lisa assured her with a complicit smile. "If he brought you here tonight, it's because he has big plans for you." Before Emily could question what that meant, the lights in the hall dimmed softly, and Richard took the stage set up at one end of the hall. All those present turned their attention to him. "Friends, colleagues, partners," Richard began with a firm and charismatic voice. "Welcome to our annual gala. This year we have much to celebrate. The Bennett Group has not only exceeded the most optimistic financial projections, but has also expanded its operations to 3 new countries." Enthusiastic applause filled the room. Richard waited for it to subside before continuing. But today I want to talk about something few people know. Earlier this year, we faced a situation that could have seriously compromised our future. An irregularity in our international balance sheets threatened not only our reputation, but also our most important contracts. A tense silence took over the hall. Emily felt all eyes turn to her. Richard continued. It was thanks to the tireless work and brilliant perception of one person that we were able to identify the problem and correct it before it caused irreparable damage. This person worked sleepless nights, dove into thousands of documents, and found not only the error but an elegant solution that ended up generating significant savings for our shareholders. Richard made a dramatic pause, his eyes finding Emily's in the crowd. That's why I'm pleased to announce that Emily Carter will be promoted to Chief Financial Officer of the Bennett Group starting next month. The announcement was met with polite applause, but Emily clearly noticed the surprised and some frankly hostile looks she received. Frank, Gregory, and Charles seemed especially shocked. Additionally, Richard continued, from now on, Emily will be part of the executive committee and will have direct participation in the company's strategic decisions. This time the murmurs were more evident. Emily remained paralyzed, trying to process what she had just heard. A promotion of this magnitude would mean a giant leap in her career and would also put her directly in the path of executives who clearly didn't approve of her presence there. Please, Emily, Richard called, extending his hand toward the stage. Come up here. As if in a dream, Emily crossed the hall, feeling all eyes on her. As she climbed onto the stage, Richard took her hand and proudly presented her to those present. To our new Chief Financial Officer. As glasses were raised in Dimaiba, a forcedly enthusiastic toast, Emily knew her life had just completely changed. What she didn't know was whether she was prepared for the consequences of that change. In the front row, Frank Williams discreetly approached Gregory and Charles. We need to talk, he whispered urgently. Tonight, after the party, in my office. The three exchanged meaningful looks as they watched Emily standing beside Richard on the stage. What should have been the moment of glory for the young accountant might be just the prelude to a storm that no one could yet foresee. The orchestra began a soft waltz as guests dispersed around the hall after the surprising announcement. Emily remained beside Richard on the stage, smiling politely at people who approached to congratulate her, though she could feel the falseness behind most of the smiles. You could have warned me, she whispered to Richard when they had a brief moment alone. He smiled, his brown eyes shining with an intensity that Emily had never noticed before in the quick professional interactions they'd had. And miss the genuine expression of surprise on your face. Impossible, he replied. Besides, you deserve every word I said. In fact, I'm being restrained with the praise. Emily felt her cheeks burn. She wasn't used to receiving so many compliments, especially from someone like Richard Bennett, known for his perfectionism and for rarely showing satisfaction with his employees' work. Mr. Bennett, Emily began. Richard, he corrected her. From now on, we're board colleagues, no formalities. Richard, she repeated, feeling strange saying his name. I'm honored by the trust, but I can't help thinking that there might be people more qualified or with more experience to take on such an important position. Richard shook his head, his expression suddenly serious. Emily, I haven't found anyone in the entire company with your combination of talent, integrity, and dedication. What you did with that internal audit. He paused, looking around to ensure no one was listening to them. You saved the company from a financial scandal that could have been devastating. And you did it without fanfare, without seeking credit, working silently while others were busy appearing important. The waltz music grew in intensity, and Richard extended his hand to Emily. Would you do me the honor of this dance? Emily hesitated. She knew how to dance reasonably well. Her mother had insisted on lessons when she was a teenager, but she had never imagined dancing with the president of the company she worked for, in front of hundreds of high society people. I don't know if. Consider it your first official act as CFO, Richard joked with a charming smile that he rarely showed in the corporate environment. With no other choice, Emily accepted his hand and allowed Richard to lead her to the center of the hall. She felt dozens of eyes following their movements. The lights in the hall seemed even brighter. The women's jewelry sparkled like stars around her, and Emily had the strange sensation of being in an elaborate dream from which she would soon wake up. Richard proved to be an excellent dancer. He led Emily with firmness and elegance, making her feel light and graceful despite her nervousness. Gradually, other couples joined them on the dance floor, diluting the attention they were receiving. "Say, it wasn't so difficult," Richard commented, leaning slightly so that only she could hear. "For you, maybe," Emily replied with a slight smile. "I'm used to dealing with spreadsheets and reports, not ballrooms and dances." "Well, I'd say you adapt perfectly to both environments." There was something in Richard's gaze that made Emily's heart race, a mixture of admiration and something deeper, something she couldn't, or perhaps didn't want to, identify. A few meters away, Frank, Gregory, and Charles observed the dancing couple with somber expressions. "He's completely lost his mind," muttered Frank, the oldest of the three, with evident contempt. "First he brings some random accountant to the gala, then promotes her directly to the board without consulting anyone." "This could interfere with our plans," observed Charles, nervously swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "If she has access to all the financial information as a director—" "Calm down," interrupted Gregory, the most calculating of the trio. "This could even be an opportunity. The girl is obviously inexperienced at the executive level. It will be easy to manipulate her or find ways to discredit her." The three exchanged complicit looks before being interrupted by Brittany, Charles's wife, who approached with a glass of champagne in hand. "So that's it? Richard is really promoting that accountant?" she asked, not hiding the disdain in her voice. "It seems so, darling," replied Charles, putting his arm around his wife's waist. "But don't worry. Temporary situations only require patience." Meanwhile, on the dance floor, the music was coming to an end. Richard and Emily stopped, still very close to each other. For an instant, the world around them seemed to disappear. There were only the two of them, connected by something that went beyond the professional relationship they had maintained until then. "You dance very well for someone who spends their days among numbers," Richard commented, releasing her reluctantly when the music ceased. "My mother insisted on dance lessons when I was a teenager," Emily explained. "She said it was important for posture and confidence." "Your mother is a wise woman." Before the conversation could continue, Lisa approached them. "Richard, the Japanese ambassador wants to talk to you about that partnership," she informed him before turning to Emily with a welcoming smile. "You were wonderful in the dance. And congratulations on the promotion. Completely deserved, from what my brother tells me." Richard seemed displeased by the interruption, but nodded. "I need to take care of this. Emily, why don't you go with Lisa? She can introduce you to some important people." With a light touch on her arm, a simple gesture that nevertheless sent an electric current through Emily's body, Richard moved away to fulfill his social obligations as host. Lisa offered her arm to Emily. "Come, let's circulate a bit. There are many people you should meet now that you'll be part of the board." The following hours passed in a whirlwind of introductions, polite conversations, and meticulous observations. Emily met influential politicians, powerful business people, and their impeccably produced wives, economic journalists, and important figures from the national financial scene. Lisa proved to be an excellent mentor, whispering useful information about each person before the introductions and skillfully guiding conversations whenever Emily seemed unsure. "You're doing very well," Lisa commented as they moved away from a group of international investors. "Many get nervous the first time they circulate in these environments." "I'm feeling like an imposter," Emily confessed, taking advantage of a moment when they were alone. "As if at any moment someone would discover that I don't belong in this place." Lisa smiled with understanding. "Dear, half the people in this hall feel exactly the same way. The difference is that they've learned to disguise it better." She paused, observing Emily carefully. "My brother is never wrong about people. If he chose you, it's because he saw something special in you." Before Emily could respond, Frank Williams approached them with a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Lisa, always dazzling," he greeted her, kissing her hand with studied gallantry, before turning to Emily. "And our new corporate star. Everyone is talking about you, you know?" There was something threatening in the way Frank pronounced those words, despite the apparently cordial tone. "I hope they're positive comments," Emily responded, maintaining her composure. "Oh, various types of comments," said Frank, his smile widening. "Some admired by your meteoric rise, others curious about exactly how you won Richard's trust so quickly." The subtext was clear and offensive. Lisa intervened immediately. "Frank, I'm sure Emily earned her place on her own merit, as we all know." Of course," he agreed, not seeming convinced. "Anyway, I wanted to personally invite you to our first executive meeting on Monday, Emily. At 9 a.m., don't be late. The board isn't used to waiting for anyone." With a slight nod of his head, Frank moved away, leaving behind a tense atmosphere. "Don't pay attention to him," Lisa advised, visibly irritated. "Frank has always been like that. He can't stand when someone new enters Richard's circle of trust." Emily nodded, but felt a weight in her stomach. Frank's barely disguised hostility confirmed her suspicions it wouldn't be easy to win her place in that new environment. As the night progressed, Emily began to feel the fatigue of constant tension. She decided to look for a quiet place to catch her breath and found a small terrace partially isolated from the main hall. The night was pleasant, with a gentle breeze that immediately relieved the heat she felt. She took a deep breath, looking at the city lights that extended as far as the eye could see. It was a stunning view, and for a moment, Emily allowed herself to absorb the magnitude of what was happening in her life. Since losing her parents in an accident when she was only 16, she had struggled alone to build her career. She had studied at public universities with scholarships, worked part-time jobs to support herself, saved every penny to be able to do a specialization in corporate finance. And now she was there, about to become the CFO of one of the largest companies in the country. It's an impressive view, isn't it? Emily turned, startled. Richard had approached silently and was now beside her, contemplating the illuminated horizon. "Yes, it's beautiful," she agreed, trying to calm her heart accelerated by the surprise. "I used to come here a lot when I was younger," Richard commented, leaning on the terrace balustrade. "This hotel belonged to my father before it passed to me. At parties, when I felt overwhelmed, I would escape to this terrace to have a moment of peace." Emily looked at him with curiosity. It was strange to see the powerful Richard Bennett, whose name was synonymous with relentless business success, speak so openly about a moment of vulnerability. "I didn't imagine someone like you would need to escape social situations," Emily commented. Richard laughed. "Someone like me? You know, always so confident, controlled, in command of everything." "That's the image I need to project," explained Richard, his expression softening. "But it wasn't always like that. When I took over the business after my father's death, I was only 28 years old. No one believed I could keep the company running, let alone make it grow." "But you did," Emily observed. "Yes, but it wasn't easy. I made mistakes, was deceived, trusted the wrong people." Richard paused, turning completely to Emily. "That's why I value people like you so much, who demonstrate integrity even when no one is looking." There was an intensity in Richard's gaze that made Emily look away, embarrassed. "About the promotion," she began, gathering courage to express her concerns. "I don't want to seem ungrateful, but I'm afraid I'm not prepared. The other directors and executives, they don't accept me. For them, I'm just an accountant who got lucky." Richard shook his head. "It wasn't luck, Emily, it was competence, and as for the others, let me worry about them." "I don't want to be a cause of conflict," Emily insisted. "Maybe it would be better to reconsider and promote someone with more experience, someone who's already part of the company's inner circle." Richard took a step forward, decreasing the distance between them. He was close enough for Emily to smell his sober and elegant perfume. "I'm tired of surrounding myself with the same people, with the same ideas and the same interests," he said firmly. "I need someone who sees things differently, someone who isn't afraid to tell the truth even when it's not convenient." He paused. "I need you, Emily." The air between them seemed charged with electricity. For an instant, Emily had the impression that Richard was going to get even closer, perhaps touch her face But the moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. "Ah, here you are," exclaimed Lisa, appearing at the entrance to the terrace. "Richard, the mayor is leaving and wants to say goodbye. Emily, dear, are you okay? You look a bit flushed." "I'm great," Emily hastened to respond, discreetly moving away from Richard. "I just needed some fresh air." Richard seemed disappointed by the interruption, but quickly resumed his professional demeanor. "Let's go back inside," he suggested. "The night is not over yet." As they followed Lisa back to the hall, Emily couldn't help but notice the calculating look that Frank, Gregory, and Charles exchanged when they saw her return in Richard's company. And for the first time, she felt something beyond insecurity. She felt fear. Something told her that those men would not easily accept the change in the company hierarchy, and that they would do everything possible to preserve their positions of power. What Emily didn't know was that, at that exact moment, a plan was already being drawn up to destroy her reputation before she could even officially assume her new position. At the opposite end of the hall, Frank discreetly took out his cell phone from his pocket and sent a message. "Found the weak point. Start investigating her past. I need something compromising by Monday." The response came almost immediately. "Consider it done." Frank put the phone away with a satisfied smile. The new CFO didn't know it, but her first trial by fire would come much sooner than she imagined, and he was determined to ensure she wouldn't pass the test. Monday morning, Emily arrived at the imposing headquarters of the Bennett Group almost an hour early. She had slept little in the last 2 nights, mentally revisiting every aspect of her new position, studying reports and memos, meticulously preparing for her first meeting as CFO. She had opted for a navy blue women's suit, discreet but elegant, complemented by a pair of small pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother, her lucky charm for important moments. Following Julie's advice, she kept the new modern-framed glasses she had worn at the gala, definitely abandoning the old ones with their severe appearance. As she crossed the main lobby, Emily immediately noticed the difference in treatment. Employees who had previously barely greeted her now smiled and saluted her with deference. The security guard who used to ask for her identification at each entrance now hurried to open the special door for directors, formally calling her Ms. Carter. That new deference didn't make her comfortable. Emily had always valued being respected, for her work, not for her position. "Good morning, Director Carter. Your new office is ready," Marcia, the executive secretary of the directorate floor, announced enthusiastically as soon as Emily exited the elevator. "Let me show you the way." The new office was impressive, spacious, elegantly decorated with large windows offering a panoramic view of the city. A noble wood desk dominated the environment, accompanied by a leather executive chair and a small, integrated meeting room. On the walls, original works of art that Emily recognized as valuable pieces by contemporary artists. "Mr. Bennett personally chose the decoration," Marcia informed her with a complicit smile, "and asked to deliver this as soon as you arrived." She extended a small envelope of fine paper. Inside, a handwritten card with Richard's firm calligraphy. "Trust your talent as much as I trust it. This space is yours by right. Good luck today. RB." Emily felt a warmth rise up her neck. There was something in Richard's personal attention that deeply disconcerted her. "I've also prepared a folder with today's meeting topics," continued Marcia, placing a leather folder on the desk. "Hand coffee is on the way, exactly as you like it. Cappuccino with cinnamon, no sugar." Emily looked at the secretary in surprise. "How do you know how I like my coffee?" Marcia smiled. "Mr. Bennett provided a detailed list of your preferences. He seems very attentive to details when it comes to you." Before Emily could process that information, her cell phone vibrated. A message from Julie. "Good luck today, boss. Show them what you're capable of." Her friend's message comforted her. Taking a deep breath, Emily sat at the imposing desk and opened the folder to review the documents one last time before the meeting. At 8:55, Marcia gently knocked on the door. It's time, Director. The meeting room is at the end of the corridor. The boardroom was even more impressive than her new office. A huge, oval, dark wood table dominated the environment, surrounded by leather executive chairs. On the walls, portraits of the company's founders, including Richard's father. Large panoramic windows offered a privileged view of the city, while a state-of-the-art audio-visual system was discreetly integrated into the environment. Frank, Gregory, and Charles were already there, talking in low voices. When Emily entered, they immediately interrupted the conversation, offering smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Emily, welcome to your first day as director," greeted Frank with false cordiality. "Choose any place, except the heads, traditionally reserved for Richard and for me as board chairman." Emily nodded politely and chose a seat near the middle of the table, placing her document folder in front of her. Other directors and senior managers began to enter the room, greeting her with different degrees of sincerity. Some seemed genuinely friendly, while others barely disguised resentment at her sudden promotion. Richard was the last to arrive, a few minutes after 9. Seeing him, Emily felt a strange mixture of relief and nervousness. He smiled briefly at her before taking his place at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone," Richard started with his usual quiet authority. "Before we begin the regular agenda, I'd like to officially introduce Emily Carter, our new Chief Financial Officer. As some of you may already know, Emily was responsible for identifying and correcting critical inconsistencies in our international financial statements, avoiding what could have become a serious problem for the group. Her promotion is a recognition of her exceptional competence and professional integrity." There was a round of polite applause. Emily nodded in thanks, maintaining her professional composure despite the nervousness. "Thank you for the trust," she said with a firm voice. "I'm committed to continuing to contribute to the growth and solidity of the Bennett Group." "Excellent," replied Richard. "Now let's move on to the agenda items. Frank, did you want to present first?" Frank stood up with a smile that Emily found particularly disturbing. "Yes, thank you, Richard. Actually, I have an issue not foreseen in the agenda, but of extreme urgency." Richard frowned. "Something that can't wait until the end of the meeting?" "Unfortunately not," replied Frank, turning on the projection system with a remote control. "I received disturbing information last night about a potential compromising situation for the group." On the big screen appeared a newspaper headline from 5 years ago: "Accounting fraud at Loureiro & Sons Company, millions diverted." Emily felt her blood freeze. Loureiro & Sons had been her previous job, before joining the Bennett Group. Although she had not had any involvement with the fraud discovered there, she knew exactly where Frank was going. "As you can see," continued Frank, changing to another slide that showed a list of employees from that time, including Emily's name. "Our new CFO worked at this company during the period when the frauds occurred." A murmur ran through the room. Richard remained impassive, but his eyes were fixed on Frank. "Frank," Emily interrupted with the firmest voice she could muster, "I was a junior accounting assistant at Loureiro. The fraud occurred in the tax department, where I never worked, and was committed by the CFO at the time, as was proven in the investigation." "Yes, yes," said Frank with a dismissive gesture. "I'm not suggesting that you were directly involved. I merely find it relevant that the board knows that you worked at a company that was involved in a significant accounting scandal. A detail that apparently wasn't mentioned during your selection process here." "It wasn't mentioned because it wasn't relevant," Emily replied, feeling increasingly cornered. "Besides, the investigation concluded that only 3 people were involved, none of them from my department." "The issue," Gregory smoothly intervened, "is not your direct culpability, but rather transparency. In a position like that of CFO, any association with fraud cases, even indirect ones, may represent a reputational risk for the group." Richard finally spoke up. "Loureiro & Sons employed more than 200 employees at the time. Emily didn't have a management position there, and as she herself said, worked in a completely different department from the one involved in the fraud." "Even so," insisted Charles, joining the other two, "considering that we're about to close important negotiations with extremely conservative international partners, perhaps we should reconsider the appointment. It's nothing personal, Emily." Emily felt all eyes on her. Suddenly she realized how well orchestrated that attack was. Frank had researched her past, found the only detail that could be manipulated against her, and presented it in a way that created doubts about her integrity. "Jaime," said Emily, standing up and regaining her professional composure, "I'd like to clarify a few points. First, my time at Loureiro & Sons is on my resume, which was submitted and analyzed during my selection process 5 years ago. There was no omission on my part." She paused, looking directly at Frank. "Second, after the discovery of the fraud, I was one of the employees invited to collaborate with the external audit precisely because of my reputation for integrity within the company. My name is in the final report as a collaborator in the investigation." This information seemed to surprise Frank, who frowned. "Third," continued Emily, gaining confidence, "before accepting the promotion, I consulted our legal department about possible conflicts or ethical issues due to my professional history. I have here the opinion signed by Mr. Mendoza, legal director, attesting that there are no impediments." She took a document from the folder and handed it to Richard, who briefly examined it before passing it to Frank with a challenging look. "Lastly," Emily concluded, "if you consider that my professional past represents any kind of risk for the Bennett Group, I am ready to step back. My commitment has always been to the integrity of this company, not to titles or positions." A tense silence took over the room. Richard was the first to break it, clapping slowly. "Brilliant," he commented. "Frank, it seems that your urgent concern has been completely clarified. Emily not only knows her professional past, but she also took all the appropriate ethical measures before accepting the promotion." He turned to the others present. "Gentlemen, I think this concludes this unforeseen matter. Can we return to our agenda?" Frank, visibly displeased but trying to maintain his composure, nodded. "Of course, I just wanted to ensure that all aspects were considered." The meeting proceeded with the planned matters, but Emily could feel the tension in the air. That had been just the first attack, and she knew that Frank, Gregory, and Charles would not give up easily. At the end of the meeting, as the executives were leaving the room, Richard approached Emily. "Impressive how you handled the situation," he commented in a low voice. "Many would have panicked." "I almost did," Emily confessed, "but I learned early that, in hostile environments, showing weakness only makes things worse." Richard observed her with an admiration that went beyond the professional. "Can we talk in private? My office in 15 minutes? Emily nodded, curious and apprehensive. As she headed to her own office to organize her meeting notes, she couldn't help but notice the calculating look that Frank gave her as she passed him in the corridor. The battle was just beginning. In Richard's office, a few minutes later, Emily found not only the president but also Lisa, who welcomed her with a warm hug. "You were extraordinary in that meeting room," Lisa praised. "Richard told me everything. Over the phone, few professionals would be able to maintain their composure as you did." "Thank you," replied Emily, still tense. "But that was just the beginning, wasn't it? They won't give up." Richard indicated an armchair for her to sit in and served her a cup of tea, another detail that surprised Emily. How did he know she preferred tea to coffee in moments of stress? "No, they won't give up," Richard confirmed, sitting across from her. "Frank especially sees you as a threat." "A threat? Me?" Emily almost laughed at the idea. "I'm just an accountant promoted to CFO. You're much more than that," Lisa intervened. "You have something that Frank, Gregory, and Charles lost a long time ago: integrity." Richard stood up and walked to the window, contemplating the city below. "Emily," he began, carefully choosing his words, "there's something I need to tell you, something very few people know." The seriousness in his voice made Emily straighten in the armchair. "About 6 months ago, I began to notice discrepancies in the financial reports of our international operations," Richard continued. "Small inconsistencies that individually seemed insignificant errors, but together formed a concerning pattern. The irregularities I found in the internal audit," Emily concluded. "Exactly. But what you didn't know is that I began to suspect that these weren't errors, but deliberate manipulations, and that these manipulations had a specific purpose. Richard turned to face her, his expression graver than Emily had ever seen. "I believe Frank, Gregory, and Charles are preparing the ground for a hostile sale of the company." The revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. "Sale? But how? You're the majority shareholder." "Yes, but with only 51% of the shares. The three together control 30%, and they have been making strategic alliances with minor shareholders. If they manage to financially destabilize the group and make the stock value fall significantly, they can force a situation where I would have no choice but to accept a purchase offer." "And you think they were manipulating the numbers to create this instability?" deduced Emily, beginning to understand the magnitude of the situation. "Exactly. And when you found the inconsistencies and corrected them, you inadvertently interrupted their plan. That's why the promotion. I needed someone of absolute trust in the finance department, someone they couldn't manipulate or intimidate." Emily felt the weight of responsibility falling on her shoulders. It wasn't just about a promotion or her professional development. She was at the center of a battle for control of one of the country's largest companies. "Why do they want to sell the company?" she asked, trying to understand the complete picture. "Money. Power, revenge," Lisa answered. "Frank always believed he should have inherited control of the company when our father passed away. He was the most experienced executive, but Dad left the presidency to Richard." "And who would buy the group?" Emily questioned. "The Asia-Pacific Consortium," replied Richard. "An international conglomerate that has been trying to enter the American market for years. They've offered astronomical sums to the three on the condition that they guarantee controlling interest." Emily tried to process all that information. Suddenly, the attack that morning made much more sense. It wasn't just about her, but about removing someone who could prevent the sale plan. "And what do we do now?" she finally asked. Richard smiled for the first time since the beginning of the conversation. "We remain vigilant. You continue doing your job with the same integrity as always. And I." He paused, exchanging a significant look with Lisa. "I have a plan, but for it to work, I need you to trust me completely, even when things seem complicated." There was something in the way Richard looked at her that simultaneously aroused trust and apprehension in Emily. She knew she was entering dangerous territory, but she also felt there was no turning back. "I trust you," she finally replied. "Good," said Richard, "because their next move will be much more aggressive, and we need to be prepared." When Emily left Richard's office, her mind was buzzing with everything she had discovered. As she passed through the executive floor reception, she noticed that Marcia was observing her with a curious look. "Is everything all right, Director?" asked the secretary. "Yes, just an intense day," Emily replied with a forced smile. "Oh, I almost forgot," said Marcia, handing her an envelope. "This arrived for you a few minutes ago. It looks important. It came from Dr. Williams' office." Emily opened the envelope as soon as she entered her own office. It was a formal memo requesting that she prepare a detailed presentation on the group's international financial performance for a special meeting with Japanese investors next week. It seemed like a normal request, but Emily now knew that nothing was normal in that situation. Checking her calendar, she noticed something even more suspicious. The meeting was scheduled for exactly the same time as an important video conference she would have with Richard to discuss the restructuring of the finance department. It was an obvious trap, forcing her to choose between the president and the investors, creating a no-win situation. If she cancelled with Richard, it would seem like she was aligning herself with the other directors. If she missed the meeting with the investors, she would be accused of negligence. Emily smiled bitterly. If this was the best they could do, they were severely underestimating her. Picking up the phone, she dialed Frank's extension. "Dr. Williams, this is Emily Carter. I received your memo about the presentation for the Japanese investors." She made a calculated pause. "I'm actually developing a new financial presentation model that I think will impress them quite a bit. Would you like us to work on this together? Perhaps we could have lunch tomorrow to discuss the details." So, the other end of the line, the silence betrayed Frank's surprise. He clearly expected protests or excuses, not a proposal for collaboration. Ah, yes, of course, he finally responded, disconcerted. Lunch tomorrow seems adequate. Excellent. I'll ask Marcia to reserve a table at the Montrose at noon. I'm sure we'll make a memorable presentation together. As she hung up the phone, Emily felt a renewed confidence. If Frank wanted war, she would show him that she wasn't as easy an adversary as he imagined. What she didn't notice was that Charles Fletcher had passed by the corridor and observed her conversation through the glass walls of her office. Immediately he took out his cell phone and sent a message to Frank. She took the bait, but she seems too confident. We need to move to Plan B immediately. Frank responded seconds later. I agree. Activate our contact in the IT department. We need to have access to her emails before lunch tomorrow. It's time to find out exactly what Richard is planning. In the building's security room, a camera discreetly recorded the exchange of glances between Charles and Gregory as they both observed Emily's office from a distance. The power game was just beginning, and all sides were willing to use all available weapons. The Montrose restaurant represented the height of sophistication in the city. With its discreet and elegant atmosphere, it was the preferred location of the business elite for important negotiations away from indiscreet ears. Emily arrived punctually at 12 p.m., choosing a refined black ensemble that Lisa had helped her select the night before. For a lunch with Frank, you need to look impeccable and intimidating, Richard's sister had advised. The maître led Emily to a reserved table in a privileged area. Before she could even settle in, she noticed Frank approaching, impeccable in his tailored Italian suit. Emily, he greeted her with false cordiality, kissing her cheek. Punctual as always. Punctuality is the minimum expected from a CFO, don't you think? She replied with a calculated smile. Frank made a gesture for the sommelier, who immediately approached. The Brunello di Montalcino 2015, please. Just water for me, Emily quickly intervened. I have a full afternoon ahead and need to maintain mental clarity. Frank smiled condescendingly. Certainly. Then it will be just one glass for me. As soon as the sommelier moved away, Frank went straight to the point. I must admit I was surprised by your reaction to my memo. I expected some resistance considering your alignment with Richard. That shows how much you still need to get to know me, Frank, Emily responded calmly. My alignment is with the good of the company, not with specific people. Frank studied her with renewed interest. Fascinating, so you're not simply Richard's protégé as everyone thinks. I'm a competent professional who was promoted on merit, she replied without hesitation. And although I appreciate Richard's trust, I have enough autonomy to recognize good opportunities when I see them. The arrival of the waiter momentarily interrupted the conversation. After they placed their orders, Frank leaned slightly forward. You? No, Emily. People like us who came from below, who conquered positions on merit, should be on the same side. And what side would that be? She asked with genuine curiosity. The side that recognizes that sometimes changes are necessary for growth, he replied, swirling the wineglass between his fingers. Richard is brilliant, no doubt, but extremely conservative. He has kept the group tied to outdated traditions while the world advances. Emily observed Frank carefully, perceiving the trap he was setting. Changes can be positive when well planned, she responded cautiously. But they can also be destructive when motivated by personal interests. Frank's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. And you believe you can discern between these motivations? I try to do my best, Emily replied with an enigmatic smile. Now, about the presentation for the Japanese investors. For the next hour, they discussed technical aspects of the presentation. Emily deliberately kept the conversation strictly professional, frustrating Frank's attempts to probe her loyalties. At the end of the lunch, when the bill was paid, Frank made one last move. Emily, you're too intelligent not to perceive what's happening. The group is at a crossroads. Big changes will come in the next few months. The question is, on which side will you be when the dust settles? Emily held his gaze without wavering. I will always be on the side where my professional integrity allows me to be, Frank. Integrity, he repeated with an ironic smile. Such a Flexible concept these days. For some, perhaps. For me, it's absolute. Frank nodded, as if he had confirmed something to himself. Well, it was an enlightening lunch. I hope we can work well together, Emily, truly. I hope so too, she replied, knowing that declaration was as false as Frank's smile. Back at the office, Emily went directly to meet with Richard, reporting every detail of the conversation. He was testing your loyalties, Richard concluded, thoughtful. He probably hoped you would reveal some information about our plans. What plans? Asked Emily. You still haven't told me exactly what you intend to do to prevent the sale. Richard hesitated for a moment. I still can't share all the details, Emily. It's not a lack of trust, it's protection. The less you know now, the less they can extract from you. Emily felt a pang of frustration. How can I help if I'm in the dark? Trust me, Richard asked, approaching and taking her hands in his, a gesture that sent an electric current through Emily's body. I promise I'll explain everything at the right time. The touch of his fingers and the intensity of that gaze left Emily momentarily speechless. There was something between them that went beyond the professional relationship, something that both were reluctant to openly acknowledge. All right, she finally agreed. I'll trust you. Richard smiled, relieved. I just need a few more days to finalize certain safeguards. For now, continue acting normally and remain vigilant. Upon leaving Richard's office, Emily found Gregory waiting in the corridor. Productive meeting? He asked with a smile that didn't reach his calculating eyes. Very, Emily replied succinctly, trying to pass by him. You know, Emily, Gregory commented, discreetly blocking her path, you should carefully consider your alliances in this company. Richard may seem invincible now, but she encouraged when he intentionally left the sentence unfinished. Gregory shrugged. Let's say the future is rarely what we expect. A smart accountant like you should know the importance of diversifying investments. He handed her a discreet card. In case you want to talk in a more private environment. Before Emily could respond, Gregory moved away with a casual wave of goodbye. Upon arriving at her office, Emily found Julie waiting for her with a worried expression. What is it? Emily immediately asked. Someone invaded your personal computer, Julie replied in a low voice. Remember how you asked me to install that monitoring program after you suspected someone was accessing your spreadsheets? It detected an access attempt last night, when you were clearly not in the office. Emily felt a chill. Did they manage to access anything? Important? I'm not sure, but from the connection time it seems they were looking for something specific. At that moment, Emily's cell phone vibrated with a message from Lisa. We need to talk urgently, not at the office. Meet me at Panorama. Cafe in 20 minutes, come alone. The intensity of the message alarmed Emily. Julie, I need to go out. Can you check if you can find out who made the access and what they were looking for? I'm already on it, Julie assured. Be careful, Emily. This is getting increasingly sinister. Panorama Cafe was a few blocks from the headquarters building, but it seemed a world apart from the corporate environment. Lisa was already there when Emily arrived, sitting at a discreet table in the back, with a tense expression. What happened? Asked Emily, sitting down quickly. Lisa looked around to ensure no one was observing them, before speaking in a low voice. Richard was threatened. What do you mean? He received an anonymous message this morning, demanding that he voluntarily relinquish control of the company, or certain compromising documents will be sent to the press and authorities. Emily felt her blood freeze. What kind of documents? We don't know for sure, but Richard suspects they're forged, something to incriminate him or publicly discredit him. Frank, Gregory, and Charles, Emily immediately concluded. Almost. Certainly, Lisa agreed, but Richard thinks there's someone else involved, someone powerful enough to give them the confidence to make such a bold move. What can we do? Lisa took a small flash drive from her purse. Richard asked me to give this to you. It contains specific instructions and some files you should analyze immediately, but not at the office. They're monitoring everything there. My apartment isn't safe either, Emily reflected. Julie just warned me that my computer was hacked. Use. To this, said Lisa, handing her a new laptop still in the box. I bought it this morning with cash at a regular store. It's not connected to anything related to the group. Emily discreetly put away the flash drive and laptop in her purse. Lisa, what's really happening? Why so much secrecy even with me? Lisa's look became even more grave, because someone close to Richard is working against him, someone he trusted. Who? We don't know yet, but Richard discovered that confidential board documents recently leaked. Documents that only people in the inner circle would have access to. A disturbing thought occurred to Emily. Do you think they might suspect me? Lisa smiled for the first time since the beginning of the conversation. Don't be silly. Richard trusts you implicitly. In fact, she hesitated. I've never seen him trust someone so much since the death of our parents. You've become special to him, Emily. Before Emily could fully process the meaning of those words, her cell phone rang. It was a text message from Richard. We need to talk now, not at the office. Meet me at the marina in 30 minutes. Emily showed the message to Lisa, whose expression became worried. This is strange. Richard is in a meeting with the Chinese representatives now. It wouldn't end before 5. An alarm sounded in Emily's mind. It's a trap. Probably, Lisa agreed. But what if it's not? What if he really needs you? Emily reflected quickly. I'll call him. The call went straight to voicemail. Emily tried again with the same result. I need to check, she decided, but I won't go unprepared. Lisa nodded, understanding. Be careful, and keep me informed. The marina was about 20 minutes by car from the cafe. During the journey, Emily tried to call Richard 2 more times without success. The uneasiness grew with each minute. Upon arriving, she immediately noticed that the place was strangely deserted for a weekday afternoon. Some boats gently rocked in the tranquil waters, but there was no movement on the normally busy docks. Emily walked cautiously along the main pier, looking for some sign of Richard. As she approached a luxurious yacht with the name Bennett, on the side she felt a shiver of apprehension. Richard, she called as she approached the vessel. No one answered, but she noticed a movement inside the cabin. With her heart racing, Emily climbed the small ladder that gave access to the yacht. Richard, are you there? When she entered the cabin, she found not Richard but Charles Fletcher, comfortably seated with a glass of whiskey in hand. Ah, Emily, he smiled coldly. Good you came. I'm afraid Richard is too busy to meet you today. Emily immediately took a step back but felt someone blocking her exit. Turning, she saw Frank standing at the cabin door. I knew it was a trap, she said, trying to remain calm while her heart raced. I prefer to call it a unofficial meeting, Frank corrected, with a dangerous smile. We need to talk about the future, Emily, your future, specifically. Charles stood up, slowly approaching. We have a proposal for you, a proposal that I believe you'll find impossible to refuse. Emily realized she was cornered. Her cell phone vibrated in her pocket, but she couldn't answer. It now. Whoever it was would have to wait, if there would be a chance to respond after what was about to come. I'm listening, she said firmly, determined not to show fear. Frank smiled, satisfied with her apparent cooperation. Excellent. You know, Emily, we always value intelligent people who know how to recognize unique opportunities. The interior of the yacht gently rocked on the waters of the marina. Emily stood firm, facing the 2 men who had cornered her. So, Frank began, settling in as if he were in his own office. Let's get straight to the point. In less than 72 hours, control of Bennett Enterprises will change hands. Richard would never allow that, Emily replied, keeping her voice firm despite the growing fear. Charles laughed, serving himself more whiskey. Richard won't have a choice, especially after the board receives certain documents. What documents? Asked Emily, trying to buy time while her mind frantically worked to find a way out. Frank extracted a folder from his executive bag and threw it on the table. See for yourself. Cautiously, Emily opened the folder. Inside were contracts, bank transfers and emails that, at first glance, seemed to implicate Richard. in a complex scheme of fund diversion and tax evasion. If they were true, they would be enough to destroy not only his reputation, but also to send him to prison. "These are forgeries," she immediately declared. "Perhaps," Frank shrugged, "but extremely convincing ones. Our specialists worked hard to ensure they would pass any superficial analysis. And amid a public scandal, who will have time for deep investigations? Investor confidence will disappear in a matter of hours." Emily realized the gravity of the situation. Even if Richard could prove his innocence later, the damage would be irreversible. "What do you want from me?" she asked directly. Charles smiled, approaching. "Intelligent as always, we need you to testify. The respected CFO confirming the existence of irregularities would be the final blow." "I would never do that," Emily immediately responded. "I imagined you would say that," sighed Frank, feigning disappointment. "That's why we prepared an incentive." He took out another folder from the same briefcase, placing it before Emily. When she opened it, she felt her blood freeze in her veins. There were documents about her past, information about her father, including details about questionable transactions he had made years ago, shortly before passing away. "How did you get this?" whispered Emily, turning pale. "We have resources," Frank responded casually. "Your father was an admirable man in many ways, but not always. Completely honest in his final business dealings. I imagine it would be devastating for his memory if this information came to light, not to mention the impact on your own career." Emily felt a wave of anger growing inside her. They were using her father, his memory, to manipulate her. "So," continued Charles, "your choice is simple. Collaborate with us and these documents disappear forever. Refuse, and not only does Richard fall, but you too, taking your father's memory along." Silence weighed in the cabin for a few moments as Emily processed everything. Then, to the surprise of the two men, she smiled. "You know what your mistake was?" she asked calmly. "Underestimating people, Richard, me, even my father." Emily discreetly took the cell phone from her pocket. "You were so busy planning your trap that you didn't realize you were falling into one." She pressed a button on the cell phone, and immediately Frank's voice filled the cabin. "We need you to testify. The respected CFO confirming the existence of irregularities would be the final blow." "Illegal recording," Charles quickly declared. "Inadmissible in any court." "I'm not concerned with courts at this moment," Emily replied. "I'm more interested in what Richard and the board will think when they hear this conversation." Frank advanced threateningly. "Hand over that phone." "Too late," Emily smiled. "The recording has already been automatically sent to 3 different recipients. One of them is Richard, another is my lawyer, and the third, well, let's say it's someone who has a lot of interest in knowing about your working methods." The cabin door suddenly opened and Richard entered, followed by 2 security guards. "Brilliant timing," Emily commented, relieved to see him. "You knew?" asked Frank, turning pale. Richard advanced calmly. "Emily and I planned this since lunch with Frank. We knew you would try something after realizing you couldn't co-opt her." "It was a calculated risk," Emily explained. "We needed concrete evidence of the conspiracy, and you kindly provided it." "This doesn't end here," Charles growled. "Actually, it does," Richard replied, handing each of them an envelope. "Your letters of resignation, effective immediately. The security guards will escort you out of the company. Properties after collecting your corporate cell phones and badges." "You can't do this," Frank protested. "We have shares in the company, which will be purchased at market value as provided by our shareholders' agreement in case of dismissal with cause," Richard explained calmly. As the security guards removed Frank and Charles from the yacht, Emily finally allowed herself to relax a little. "How did you know I would come?" she asked Richard when they were alone. "I didn't know," he replied honestly. "It was a huge risk. Lisa called me as soon as you left the cafe, and we tracked your phone. I arrived here just 5 minutes ago." Emily looked at the folders left on the table. They had information about my father, things that even I didn't know. Richard sat beside her, gently taking her hand. "We can face this together if you want, or we can leave the past where it belongs." She pondered for a moment. "My father, Made mistakes like all of us. But that doesn't diminish who he was, nor define who I am. Richard smiled, squeezing her hand. That's why you're extraordinary, Emily. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden reflections on the marina waters. Emily felt a weight being removed from her shoulders. And now? Is the company safe? Not completely yet, Richard admitted. Frank and Charles were just pieces on the board. The real adversary is still in the shadows. Gregory? Possibly. But I suspect there's someone else, someone outside the company pulling the strings. Emily nodded, understanding. The work isn't over then. No, Richard confirmed, but we took a big step today, and with you by my side as CFO, I'm confident that we'll discover the whole truth. There was something in the way he looked at her that made Emily's heart race. It wasn't just professional admiration, there was something deeper, more personal. Richard, He moved closer, his hand still holding hers. Emily, in these last few days, I realized something that perhaps already existed for a longer time. My admiration for you goes beyond the professional. Emily felt her face burn. That would be complicated. I'm your subordinate. Technically, as a director, you report to the board, not directly to me, he replied with a smile. But I understand. Your concerns. We can go slowly, get to know each other outside the work environment. The proposal was tempting. Emily couldn't deny the attraction she felt for Richard. His integrity, intelligence, and strength of character had captivated her from the beginning. One step at a time, she finally agreed. Richard smiled, seeming relieved. Starting with dinner, perhaps, without talking about work or conspiracies. That would be nice, Emily replied, returning the smile. When they left the marina together, the sun had already completely set. The city lights shined in the distance like a sea of earthly stars. Emily looked at the urban horizon, at the skyscrapers that housed the corporate power of the city, including the headquarters of Bennett Enterprises. You know what my father used to say? She commented as they walked side by side. That true wealth isn't in how much money you accumulate, but in how much value you create. Richard nodded, thoughtful. Your father was a wise man, and he raised an even wiser daughter. At that moment, Emily knew she had found her place, not just in the company, but also alongside someone who shared her fundamental values. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, with many challenges still to face, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt truly confident about the future. As they moved away, their fingers discreetly intertwined. They didn't need words. The simple gesture said everything that needed to be said. Today's battle was won, and together they would be prepared for whatever came next. At the police station, that same night, Gregory Mitchell was sitting alone, in an interrogation room. On the table before him, a detective placed a file and several photographs. Mr. Mitchell, we have some questions about certain financial transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, and also about this man. The detective pointed to one of the photographs, showing a powerful businessman known for questionable methods. We believe you can help us understand this connection. Gregory looked at the evidence with a pale expression, realizing that the game had just begun and that perhaps he had been on the wrong side from the start. Meanwhile, in Emily's apartment, she finally allowed herself a moment of peace. On her desk, the flash drive that Lisa had given her contained not only the evidence against Frank and Charles, but also a personal file, a letter from Richard, expressing his admiration and feelings for her, written weeks before the recent events. Emily smiled as she reread the words, putting the small device in a safe place. Tomorrow would be a new day, with new challenges, but also with new possibilities. And for the first time in her career, she wouldn't face those challenges alone. Dear readers, Emily's rise in the corporate world has come to an end, but her journey has just begun. If you've also faced professional challenges or identified with the battle between integrity and ambition, share your thoughts with us in the comments. For more stories of strong protagonists who face moral and romantic dilemmas in the corporate environment, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Every week we bring new narratives that explore the complexities of human and professional relationships. Leave your like if you rooted for the partnership between Emily and Richard, and tell us, what would you do in her place? Your opinions help us create the next stories that will make your heart race and your mind reflect. And don't forget to check out our Women in Power playlist with other inspiring stories that will certainly captivate you in the same way. Click on the link to the left and dive into new narrative universes.